Before the 2017 season, I was pretty high on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, if memory serves me correctly. Maybe I bought into they've got these offensive weapons and da-da-da-da-da. Maybe Jameis Winston will take another step forward in his development in year number 3, and da-da-da, and all that shit didn't happen. It flat out didn't happen. So I looked before this year and said, I'm not making that same mistake again. Sure, they went out and they traded for Jason Pierre-Paul because they needed somebody to get some pressure off of the edge. But you had the Jameis Winston suspension for the first 3 games of the year, and I just didn't really like the makeup of the team. Had concerns on both sides of the ball. In particular, had concerns about the head coach, Dirk Cutter, and for valid reasons. And those reasons were proven as this team ended up sucking it really, really badly. And Dirk Cutter got fired as he deserved to, and the Bucs have the 5th overall pick in the 2019 draft. Now, what's crazy for the Bucs is offensively, they were really good. Sure, some of that came when they were down a couple of scores. Some of it was garbage time, but in general, statistically, they were pretty good. Yeah, they were 29th in rushing yards per game, so that's not exactly great. But they were the top team in the NFL, most passing yards per game, 3rd in total yards per game. So this was a team that could get a lot of yards. They had 8 games, half of their games this year, where they scored over 27 points. Now, granted, they were 3-5 in those games, but they had half of their games where they scored over 27 points. So you can say offensively, this offense put up enough points more often than not where this team should have been able to win more games, and they didn't get it done. Now, you look at the early season Fitzmagic beating the Saints in week 1. And all that was going on and some of the battle back and forth of should they stick with Fitzmagic, should they go to Jameis Winston, they go back to Jameis Winston, but then they go back to Fitzpatrick and go back to Jameis Winston. It was all a big mess. And when you look at these two guys combined, they ended up contributing 39 touchdowns. So that's not bad. The problem is they turned the ball over 30 times. Way, way, way too many turnovers, especially when your defense stinks. And some of that sure can come from the fact of your defense stinks, so it puts a lot of pressure on you to have to score points. But you can't turn the ball over 30 times between your 2 quarterbacks and expect it to be a recipe for success to win a lot of games in the NFL. And clearly it wasn't. Defensively, they sucked. Never consistent. They sucked everywhere. 24th against the run, 26th against the pass. 27th in total yards. They had 10 games where they allowed 27 or more points. So they were getting shredded. Yeah, their offense scored a lot of points, but their offense more often than not had to score a lot of points because their defense absolutely sucked. With that said, though, you look at this Bucs team and you say 7 losses by 8 points or less. So 7 of those, 11 losses they had, they were within a score. The record could have been entirely different, but it ultimately wasn't. Because they turned the ball over too damn much at times, and they couldn't stop anybody defensively. So it's not a surprise to see that Dirk Cutter was sent packing. And to me, this is a little bit of karma for the Buccaneers organization. You had Lovie Smith for 2 years. Year 1, the team sucked. They were going to suck with just about anybody. Got the number 1 overall pick. They took Jameis Winston. Year 2 of Lovie, they win 4 more games, show some growth and progression. But you couldn't wait to send Lovie Smith packing so that way you could promote the offensive coordinator, Dirk Cutter. To now, 3 years later, his ass was sent packing, no playoff appearances, regression in Jameis Winston. Good job, Buccaneers. You got the job fucking done, didn't you? Got exactly what the hell you deserved. I feel no sympathy whatsoever. So they went out into this head coaching market, and they went and got Bruce Arians. I'm maybe not totally surprised, maybe a little bit surprised that Bruce Arians came back to be a head coach. Maybe he just needed a season to kind of recharge his cells a little bit. Maybe he just needed a season to get healthier, physically and mentally. And he still had that itch to coach again. I look at this hire by the Buccaneers and say, you know what? Arians is a solid coach. He certainly is. And he does good work with quarterbacks. So for so many reasons, this is a good hire. You figure getting Todd Bowles as your defensive coordinator, not bad. You look at this, though, this reality to me is when you look, regardless of the length of contract with Bruce Arians, this is a 1-year deal with options. And what I mean by this is Jameis Winston is getting ready to enter his 5th year in 2019. This is the season you have to figure out if you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, are you truly going to want to pay Jameis Winston big-time money for a long time. This is a guy you took back number 1 overall in 2015. You have to find out. And this season right here, there is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He either is or he isn't. And you hire a guy like Bruce Arians because you're specifically trying to find out, is this dude that dude that you want to invest in big time long term? So I totally applaud the hire. It's a totally sensible hire. It's the most sensible hire they could have made. Go with an established offensive mind that is a proven NFL commodity as a head coach that has won games, taken teams to the playoffs, helped get more out of quarterbacks, whether it be Big Ben or Carson Palmer, so forth. It makes sense to bring him in because for Jameis Winston, 2019 is it. For the Buccaneers with him, 2019 is it. And you had to have a guy that you could come in and have some confidence that if it's going to get done in year one, this was the type of guy to do it, and that's what Bruce Arians is. This, to me, really is a one-year hire, even though Arians will probably stay more than 1 year. You get what I'm saying. For all intents and purposes, his number one goal, his number one job, his number one function, his only priority is to get Jameis Winston to show up and show that he can be that guy so the Buccaneers have an excuse to pay him big money long term. It is that simple. It is that simple. But I don't know if it's that easy for Jameis either, and you really can't just solely put it on Jameis' quarterback position, necessarily even Dirk Cutter. You look at the recent draft history for this team, and it's not that great. It really isn't. Like, you look back at the 2014 draft, the only player they really have left is Mike Evans. Now, he's absolutely a stud, but that's pretty much all they got left. That 2015 draft, they didn't do bad. Jameis, Donovan Smith, Ali Marpet, Quan Alexander. But the pick that really matters the most is Jameis Winston, and we're 4 years in, and the jury's still out. And right now, if you were leaning on one side of the fence or another in terms of what you think Jameis Winston is the guy or not, if you have any brain matter in your head at this point, you're leaning towards he's not. So if he's not, then that whole draft class is a failure. The 2016 draft, Vernon Hargreaves has been a bust. Noah Spence has been a bust. Roberto Aguayo was a huge bust. You know, you look at that class, those first 3 picks, Hargreaves that a lot of people liked, he sucked. Noah Spence that a lot of people were really big on, he sucked. And Aguayo, who I was big on, absolutely sucked. Felonious big balls and got caught. That 2017 draft class looks a little bit better with O.J. Howard if he stays healthy, Justin Evans, Chris Godwin, Kendall Beckwith. Good class. But you look at this past draft, Vita Vea. I mean, I still can't for the life of me. I liked Vita Vea a lot as a prospect, but I'm not passing on Derwin fucking James for a 340-pound nose tackle, as much as I might have liked Vea. Like, Vea could be a really, really, really good player. Derwin James is special. Derwin James was special in year number 1. And for a team whose secondary sucked high dick, it seems ridiculous. It absolutely seems ridiculous to me. Ronald Jones was a huge disappointment for me in year 1. He was a bust. You had other guys like M.J. Stewart, Carlton Davis, Jordan Whitehair. They're young guys in the secondary, but they got shredded a lot. So this Bucs team, when you look at the recent draft history, hasn't been great. They're going to have to be better in 2019's draft, or this could all go really, really wrong in a great big hurry. Part of the challenge for the Buccaneers, though, is when you look at them in this offseason, they've only, as of right now, got about $9 or $10 million in salary cap space. You would assume Deshaun Jackson's gone, so that'll free up some room. They might cut guys like Vinny Curry. The real interesting one is going to be Gerald McCoy. Talk about the guy who was the 3rd overall pick in that 2010 draft, who has been that building block on that defense for a long time. Are we at the end, after 9 seasons, the end of Gerald McCoy in Tampa Bay? Personally, I certainly hope not, but maybe they feel like it's just not worth the price of paying him anymore. I don't really know. So you could look at it and say they've got some flexibility to maybe cut some guys. Maybe a surprise cut would be somebody like a Cameron Brate, who they gave a bunch of money to. But you look at them, and you're like, they don't have a ton of flexibility in terms of guys that get cut, but who knows? Maybe they'll find other guys to get rid of. But this team needs a lot of help in this draft. And sure, again, you brought in Bruce Arians ultimately to get the most out of Jameis Winston. That was the number 1 need. You need a head coach that can do better with Jameis Winston. And if anybody's going to, based off who was available, it was going to be Bruce Arians. But they need help on both sides of the ball. Defensively, corner is still obviously a huge need. Absolutely, as they've invested multiple high picks in that position, they've gotten it wrong when it matters. So they can still use upgrades there. I still feel like they can use an impact difference maker at the safety position. Passing on Derwin James last year was foolish. Will they find a guy maybe in day 2 of the draft that can come in and have an early impact? Offensively, I look at their running back position, Ronald Jones. Maybe you say it's too early to give up on him, but at this point in time, he's shown you absolutely nothing that makes you think that he could be that guy long term. So it's still a need. You've got those playmakers at wide receiver and tight end, but you got to have a running game to balance it all out. You really, really do. Because again, maybe your quarterbacks don't have to throw as much and take as many chances and gamble as often if you're doing better than 29th in the league running the football. And maybe it's time to explore drafting a young quarterback, because if Jameis isn't that dude, maybe you can find somebody else that you can groom to be able to step in 2020 and save you a shit ton of money on the salary cap. Maybe they could use another offensive line or outside linebacker, excuse me. I still feel like they could use help on the defensive line. They need more guys that can get to the quarterback, because if your secondary is going to stink, you might as well give the opposing quarterbacks less time to stand back and pick you apart. And, you look at the Buccaneers, and it could be one of those things that you look at them, 2019 will be vastly different from 2018. And this could be a team that kind of sneaks into the mix and is thinking about the playoffs. But it ultimately is all going to come down, draft aside, cap casualties aside, free agency aside. It's going to come down to what Bruce Arians can do with Jameis Winston. And the next 5, 7, 10 years of the future of this Buccaneers organization hangs on that relationship and how productive it is.